fix your backgrounds because apparently the sensors were dirtier than expected, and get rid of all these things in one fell swoop instead of sitting here with a remove tool and individually removing these pieces of dust. We're going to clean up the background with one action. This still isn't going to clean up the product itself. You're still going to have to come around and clean up the product here and do things like straighten out these edges and clean up these little things here. But we're going to work on cleaning up the background, and it should also get rid of some of this banding for the if there is some banding. It may add some, but we'll take that risk. So first thing we'll do is you'll open up your photo in RAW, and you're going to do your base exposure and color adjustments here. Remember that anything you do in Camera Raw is baked in, and you won't have the same latitude once it's opened in Photoshop. So once this is opened up here, first thing I want to do is make 2 copies of the background layer, because we're not going to work on this background layer. And if it'll ever let me copy, we'll get going. So on this top copy, the first thing I want to do is select the product itself, as we're going to isolate it. We're going to isolate the product and the background from each other. Fast and easy way, especially if you have an easy high contrast subject like this, is to use the object selection tool. And I'm going to click that there, and that's going to select my object. Otherwise, you can do like in our other video, is use a polygonal or lasso tool and come in here and select the product. But this one seemed to select it clean enough. Again, we could always come back and adjust the selection if we need to. So now that I've selected the subject, I'm gonna mask that top layer there, and that's gonna isolate it. Now I'm gonna turn off that layer. I'm gonna work on this one. I need to reselect that product. Easy way to do that is to hold down the command button on Mac, or I guess it's Control or Alt on PC. I'm gonna hold command and left click the mask itself, and that reselected it. But this is a little bit too tight of a selection for what we're going to do next, so I want to expand this a little bit. I'll come up here to select, modify, expand. I'm going to expand by 50 pixels. That should be enough for this. You could experiment depending on your resolution, but 50 pixels on this one seemed to have selected a good little gutter around the product. My next thing will be to get rid of this product and just leave me with a background. So I'm going to come over to edit. I'm going to use content aware fill for this. Content aware fill should get rid of most of the product here. It's going to have some smudges here from where the shadow is. Don't worry about that on this step. What I am going to do is make sure that my output settings are to current layer. If this isn't giving you this result or expected results, just make sure that this this masked area is only selecting the background and not part of the product. So this is kind of ideal here because it's only using this information to fill it in. I'm gonna hit OK. I'm gonna let it do its thing, and there, my product is gone. I'm gonna clean up a little bit of this just because it may give me some trouble later. I'm gonna use a patch tool for that, and give me a second while I find it on this computer. And then with a patch tool here, I'm just gonna grab these. It's not very important for it to be perfect. I just don't want really dark smudges. I'll get rid of this one spot too, just for fun. So now that I've done this, one quick way of cleaning all this up, all these spots, is I'm just gonna blur it all the way. Just like most of my nights in college, we're gonna blur it until it doesn't exist anymore. Go to blur, Gaussian, oh, not lens blur. Sorry, cancel. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Then with my preview selected, I'm just gonna start blurring this until it's all gone. And I'm gonna keep going. You might have to get pretty aggressive with this. I'm going all the way to about 170 pixels. Your mileage may vary. Made okay. I added a little bit of banding, but we'll try to get rid of some of that in a second. So now this is our preliminary step, and if I turn this layer back on, with the product, you'll see that it's back. It looks a little artificial, right? Because we got rid of some of this shadow, this drop shadow that was under it. But and you can see that if I turn off this layer, you'll see some of this shadowing down here, which is what grounds it. So I'm going to come back to my mask here, and I'm going to zoom in a little. I'm going to grab a black soft paintbrush, right, with 0% hardness there. I'm going to make sure I'm using black paint because I want to, white paint, because I want to reveal some of this underlaying layer. So I'm going to paint around this bottom edge here to bring that drop shadow back. I'm going to zoom back out, and you're going to see that it kind of grounds that product there. Now it's looking realistic. One big problem with this technique is that it cleans up the background too much. If you notice, the original background has some noise in it, right? That's just the texture of the paper. So we're going to reintroduce that noise back into it. I'm going to zoom in nice and tight here. And between my background layer and the product layer, and let's name these to stay somewhat organized. So between these two layers, I'm going to add a new layer. I'm going to do that with Command-Shift-N, which will give us this new layer window. Again, Command-Shift-N on Apple. I'm going to call this layer grain. I'm going to change the mode to overlay, and I'm going to click this box, fill with overlay neutral color, 50% gray. Once I hit OK, since I changed that blending mode to overlay, this gray doesn't show at all because overlay only shows the highlights and the shadows, and this is only showing exactly 50%. So it's neither highlight or shadow, so it's invisible. But to this layer, I'm then going to come over here and go to Filter, Noise, Add Noise. Now, the noise that's back here should be Gaussian. Gaussian means it's randomized order. It's chaotic. If you go uniform, then all the grain is in perfect rows, and that's not how noise works, right? So we're going to hit Gaussian, and we're doing monochromatic because your noise shouldn't be RGB. It should be black and white. And then I'm going to zoom in even more so it's obvious when you're watching this. I'm going to reduce this amount because this is a little too noisy, right? So I'm going to bring this down. For most photos, what I've noticed is the sweet spot is going to be somewhere between 2 and 3%. And if I can get this to just do 3, I'm going to do 3 for now because you could always bring down the opacity. Now that gave us some texture to the background, right? Problem is this texture is just a little bit too sharp. So I'm going to come back over to Filter, go to Blur. I'm going to give that grain some blur, but it's going to be a tiny amount. Again, I found the sweet spot on this to be somewhere around 0.3 pixels. I'm going to hit OK. So now that looks realistic, right? So now we have a realistic gradated background. And that should be about it. Now if I group these layers, you could see the difference, especially once I zoom in, between the original and the cleaned up. And now I'm able to come in and do my product. Sometimes it's easier, especially if you have to reshape the product, to do that first and then do this process. But again, your mileage may vary on that, and you make the judgment call when to do that. Let me know if you have any questions.